So, we have been talking all week about what it means to climb Mount Everest. And we have talked about the different ways that God has the power to help us do that. So these have been our themes. We started off with God has the power to provide. Hold on! That's our saying after each of these. Hold on, like you're holding on to God's arm, right? You see, hold on. There's some hold on, like you're holding on to God's arm. So we started with God has the power to provide. And then we talked about God has the power to heal. Hold on. And then we talked about God has the power to forgive. Hold on. And finally, on our fourth night, we talked about God has the power to love us forever. Hold on. And we talked about all of these verses and ways that we hold on to God. And the idea of holding on, Isaiah, can you come down here and help me with something? The idea of holding on is really important because when you're climbing a mountain, it's really steep, right? And what happens if you slip? You fall. So that's why when you're climbing a mountain, it's really important that you bring some rope. So I brought some rope with me this morning. You hold me to this? Okay, so if I'm climbing up a mountain, I've got this rope tied around my waist with a good climber's knot. If I'm climbing up the mountain and I slip, we need a rope to hold on to us. But Isaiah, do you think you could hold me up if I slip? You think so? If I'm slipping down the mountain, I need someone who's able to hold me as I try to hold on to God. And so, who do you all think I can rely on to be on the other end of my rope here? I can rely on God. I can rely on Jesus to be the one who holds me up as I'm trying to hold on to all of these great promises that we know about God. God has the power to provide. God has the power to forgive. God has the power to love us forever. And God has the power to heal. Hold on! So we're going to look at a verse of Scripture here, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about all of our themes. Okay, so let's not flip it around here too much. All right. So, when we begin to slip in life, and this is your first sermon note, if you've got a bulletin, there's some blanks in there. If you want to fill in the blanks, we'll have them up here on the screen. When we begin to slip in life, God grabs our hand and tells us, hold on. It's one thing, we know all of these different ideas about the things that God can do for us, but if we don't hold on to them, then they're not going to do us a whole lot of good as we go through life. And so, I want to read to you a passage from the book of Hebrews that talks about this power that God has to keep us strong. So, this is Hebrews chapter 6, okay? And this is a little different picture. It's talking about a boat instead of a mountain, but it's the same idea. So, Hebrews 6 says this thing. There's two things that don't change because it's impossible for God to lie. God did this to show that we who've taken refuge in Him can be encouraged to grasp the hope that is lying in front of us. That hope, which is a safe and secure anchor for our whole being, enters the sanctuary behind the curtain. That's where Jesus went in advance and entered for us. Do you know there's something called an anchor that they use in mountain climbing? It's something that you can put into the rock so that if you fall, it will hold you up. And so our anchor that we have as Christians is the cross. And so you all saw how Isaiah was trying to hold on to that rope, but no person can hold us up when we fall. But if we clip ourselves and our rope onto the cross, then all of a sudden we discover that we've got an anchor that is firm and secure. An anchor that isn't going to fail when we rely on God. And so when we look to God and we trust in God for God's power, we realize that truly God does have the power to provide. Hold on! This is been my game for those of y'all who haven't been here to try to see if I could get our Bible themes out when the kids weren't paying attention. So God has the power to provide, right? Hold on. And in all of these ways, we can trust that the power that God has is enough for us to remain firm and secure in Jesus Christ. All right, so your next sermon note is this, and this was this theme for our Everest VBS. Conquering challenges with God's mighty power requires that we trust and we rely on God as we face the challenges of life. So it doesn't do you any good if you've got a rope and you know that God has the power to heal. Hold on. If you don't rely on that power and that strength, it's as good as having a rope that's not attached to anything. You can't trust in that. Now, if any of you all have ever been mountain climbing or been rappelling is when you go down the side of something, you have to trust your rope. If you don't trust your rope, you can't do anything because you're going to be trying to hang on to the wall or hang on to the side of the mountain when you need to let the rope hold you up. And that's the same way with following after God. We've got to put our trust in the anchor who's holding. Because if we don't trust in that anchor, then there's no way we're going to be able to get in touch with God's power that is sufficient to hold us up, that is enough to keep us focused on God. So we're going to look a little bit at each of our themes here. First of all, God has the power to provide. Hold on. And this was our theme verse here. God will generously provide all that you need. Now, which of you all who were here for Vacation Bible School remember something we talked about when we talked about God has the power to provide? What do you remember, Jackson? Aiden. Oh, Aiden, sorry. I'll get y'all straight. What do you remember? You forget. Did any of y'all remember the kid video that you watched that night? Yeah, what was that video about? It was about a family, right? What do you remember about the family? That's right. The children had no parents. And they were relying on God to provide that, right? And what happened? They got parents. They did. So it was a story about some was it all boys? I can't remember. It was all boys. A group of brothers who did not have a family. And they were relying on God's power to provide. And the story tells about how God provided in that situation because they were relying on God. They were trusting that God was able to do that. And so we remember this verse. God will generously provide you with all that you need. All right, the second day we talked about God has the power to heal. Hold on. What did you all learn about God's power to heal when we talked about God's power to heal? Any of you all remember? Well, I can remember we talked a lot about our sadness in our Bible time. Several of you all told stories about how you were sad when you had pets who had died or friends or family who had died. And we talked about God has the power to heal our broken hearts, right? You all remember that? Y'all with me? Yes? Got a couple of yeses here. This was our verse for that night. God heals the brokenhearted and bandages their wounds. You all remember? Yeah, that's right. God heals the brokenhearted and bandages their wounds. And that is a power that God has for us when we rely on God. Again, God is the anchor. We've got the rope. We got to hold on, though. All right, our third theme was, anybody remember? God has the power to forgive. We have any Pikes here? Anybody that was on the Pike team? There's a Pike. Pike is this guy right here. He's a mountain goat. And he taught us about God's power to forgive. Now, when we talked about God's power to forgive, we brought up this cross. And each of us had the opportunity to put our fingerprint on this cross because we talked about the need that we all have for God to forgive us and how incredibly amazing it is that through Jesus Christ, through the cross, God does that. And that power is something that's available for us. And so this was our verse. You are a God of forgiveness. And that was a great promise. And still is a great promise that we hold on to. All right. Now, our final night, we talked about this theme over here. Who are my Yetis? 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 A couple of Yetis. God has the power to love us forever. Hold on. God has the power to love us forever. And that was really important because if you remember, we took some time to write down those things we thought might separate us from God's love. Did y'all come up and write something on these sheets? Yeah. How many of y'all wrote something on these sheets? We wrote all the things we thought might separate us from God's love, but then we remembered something. We remembered that there is nothing that can separate us from God's love. And so we saw these things that are sad and they're hard and hurtful. We saw them turn into God's tears, right? As we sprayed them. And as they faded away, we realized, you know what? They can't separate us from God's love. Nothing can separate us from God's love. Because God has the power to love us forever. Hold on! So I want to encourage you all. I don't know if you all had a chance to look at these real closely. One's here and the other one's over here. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them real closely, but I'm going to leave them out here where you can see them. I'll stick it to the bottom of Mallory over here. So you all can come look at them later. But just to remember that God's power to love us forever is something that He never ends, right? Something that never runs out. So, here's the question that I have for all of you as we finish up our week of Bible school and we think about this rope. Do you look for God's mighty power when you're in challenging times, or do you rely on your own strength and ability? And so, this rope is kind of stuck around my waist here. I can't really... You'll notice that I've been trying to figure out what do I do with it when I'm not talking about it. I kind of stuff it in my pocket. It doesn't really fit in my pocket very well. It's just kind of here, whether I'm using it or not. And I could fall off the side of the mountain, but if I'm not using my rope, it's not going to help anything, right? And so what I want you all to think about is how do you use the rope that is holding on to God's power and God's promises. And so that's the question for you all to think about today, whether you're an adult or a child who's been here for VBS all week. How is it that you can rely on God's mighty power? And my hope for you is that as you rely on God, you would realize this rope's pretty strong. This rope's going to hold up when it is attached to the right anchor. And so, there's a term in climbing called clip-in. This carabiner here, y'all hear that? It's like clip sound. It says clip-in. Y'all clip in. Connect yourself to Christ and hold on, because when you do that, you'll see God at work. And it won't just be one poster full of stickers of places where we've seen God, but it'll be a life that's full of those times when you've encountered God.